Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am excited to be here today with an amazing man who I've only recently become acquainted with, Derek Hart. Derek, thank you for being here today.
Hi, nice to be here.
We are colleagues and we've recently connected, as I said, and one of the things that we both have a common belief in is the importance of vulnerability. And so today we actually wanted to talk about why vulnerability is the single most important thing that can heal a relationship. So I think this is a hugely important topic. I'm glad we're covering it. And I want to give Derek a little intro for those of you who don't know him. And then we're going to dive in. So Derek has been counseling people since 1990 with over 22,000 hours of experience. That's a lot of experience you've got there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the unique experience he brings to his counseling practice is based on years of doing his own deep inner work. So he's been a student and teacher of the human journey, and he's continually studied the great works of the top psychologists and spiritual masters of our time. And through the years of honing his skills, he's come to some really powerful conclusions about the experience of the couple. And this knowledge and wisdom of his teachers, combined with the courage and vulnerability of the couples he's worked with, gives him a really unique perspective on how to rapidly move a couple through distress and back to connection. And for you listening, if you've been in a relationship, which likely you have, you know that those are the most challenging moments, right? Those moments of distress can create a downward spiral and can break trust and can really break a relationship. So Derek has a lot of experience with couples and helping couples move through that, and really believes that the witnessing of how a couple truly heals can very rapidly teach us how to do this for ourselves, and that theory and thinking alone are not enough, that we have to do more than gain insight. And we really need to experience what others are going through and learn from it and take that insight, into our own willingness to put it into practice, really. Yeah. So Thank you for all the work you've been doing on yourself and with the couples. And it's really, really important. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yep.
So let's dive in to the heart of it. I like starting with the heart of it first instead of, weaving our way to get there.
Sure.
Let's talk about, why vulnerability is the single most important thing that can heal a relationship. And I'll let you start us off on your experience with these couples you've worked with and, something you've seen that feels really important for people to know.
Yeah. I'm still amazed constantly when I have a couple sit down in front of me for the very first time, and I usually give them 10 to 15 minutes to start talking about, why they're here, mm-hmm. and why are they here sitting in my office. And they always have a series of things they're frustrated about, and they start telling me. And I very quickly notice how, while they're listening to each other, they really have very different stories every time. And meaning the man will have a different story from the woman's story is different from the man's. And it's just a different story about what they're frustrated about. And it's incredible how elegantly right off the bat, they can say what the problem is. I mean, they just tell me, and if I just had an answer like, well, why don't you just spend more time with the children and split the time 50-50, or give them a solution, it would all be fixed, right? And
right.
That's actually not the problem.
Right, exactly.
The problem is not their exact story. The problem happens, or the problem's noticed when about minute number 16 or 17, when I decide, that I understand their conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I usually say something like, okay, would you, I'll say it to the man maybe, would you turn to your wife and look at her and ask her why she's frustrated?
Mm-hmm.
And she, she's got a tear in her eye and she's maybe gripping the chair, and he's kind of dumbfounded at that point. And then I'll ask him, did you know that she was frustrated?
Right.
And he has no idea. Now, what's so fascinating is that she has no idea either. She knows she's agitated. She knows something's wrong. She knows she's rolling her eyes at him maybe. But she doesn't know the importance of knowing what to do to stop and share with him she's frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't let that moment skip. I don't let it pass by. But they, when they're arguing, they let 100, 200, 300 of those moments pass by in a 30-minute argument.
Right. I mean, I see that when I work with couples too. It's like, it's so easy to stay in the story and to try to defend and protect ourselves. And I'm saying ourselves because, I've been in couples too, right? Where I do this. Yeah. And yet those seemingly tiny or seemingly insignificant moments where we actually recognize, oh, there's a feeling here, or there's a longing here, or there's a vulnerability, coming back to our topic, right? There's a vulnerability here. Right. And that when we actually connect in a kind of heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul way, when we actually see, I think not only for the frustration, but even deeper, the pain that this person we love is going through, or feel our own pain and the vulnerability of it, and instead of trying to, attack or defend or whatever, to actually really be willing to feel our own pain. I think that's what I'm guessing the moments you're speaking to that I have with clients where suddenly something changes there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is, so in the scenario I'm describing, so the man notices, his wife is frustrated, and she has a tear in her eye. And what's really gone on there to create that pattern in their relationship is, long ago, maybe 5 years, 10 years, actually often
30, 40.
30. Yeah. Well, actually often very early in the relationship, like the first year for sure.
Yeah.
What happened is one of them hurt the other's feelings.
Yep.
And it didn't get shared.
Yes.
Because sharing that you hurt my feelings brings up the ultimate risk, which is that you're going to leave.
Yes.
If I share the truth.
Right.
And if I share the truth about how you hurt my feelings, and then you defend yourself because of your own embarrassment, then we're off and running, and we're building a 10, 20, 30-year pattern of the rules that we don't share what's really happening.
Well, right. And it feels, I think the longer we don't share, the more we are building this kind of facade of, well, now I can't share, right? Especially now that all this time has gone by, now the risk gets bigger, now the stakes get bigger, now you're definitely going to leave me. And, it's interesting. I'm curious about, this might just be kind of an off the cuff language thing too, but a lot of couples, what I see is the you hurt my feelings dynamic versus, ouch, I'm hurting right now, or my feelings are hurt. I don't know if it's what you did or what you said, or if it's my old wounding, or for whatever, it's probably both of ours.
Right.
But, how can we actually be on the same team here? I have a friend and a colleague who, I don't know where this came from or if she made it up, but she introduced me to the term race to vulnerability.
Uh-huh.
And it's been so meaningful and useful for so many people I know and so many clients, where in a couple, when there's this idea that whoever actually gets to the vulnerability first wins.
Yeah.
And so then instead
Yeah.
of, okay, I'm trying to protect, or I'm trying to defend, or I need to be right, it's like, oh, there's a value that starts to happen around, if I can bring my vulnerable heart, pain, desire, whatever, then I win. Now the idea isn't to win, but it's the idea
Right.
that we as a couple then get to be on the same team and kind of win together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The one of the most interesting words that I actually bring up very slowly with the couple is the word vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
It's a word that actually means that you're putting yourself in danger.
Uh-huh.
And it's a fascinating thing. Everybody has a different definition about what vulnerability is.
Mm-hmm.
And what I don't know if I could do the work I do if I did not have the tool of vulnerability, because I detect what's bothering the two people, and it's often very different things.
Yeah.
And I actually not only model for them what the vulnerable thing to say would be, I actually say it to one of them using like I statements.
Yes.
And I ask them to then turn to each other and say very specific things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And these are I call it staging interactions with them. It's like staging a little play, a little drama.
Yes.
And you might think it sounds a little antiquated, but it actually is unbelievable how fast it goes right to the heart.
Oh yeah.
It's quick, and it disarms the other person's defensiveness,
Mm-hmm.
and brings them both together. Now the tricky part is that to be vulnerable, you have to say what you're feeling and say how the other person affected you,
Mm-hmm.
and do it in a gentle enough way to where you're mostly sharing your own hurting,
Right.
but
Versus.
definitely including them
Yeah.
in what's happened. And if you do it in a certain way,
Yeah.
the other person just automatically comes forward.
Yeah. Well,
It's fascinating.
yeah, and it's interesting too, and this goes back to our topic of why vulnerability is the most important thing for healing, right? And there is
Yeah.
something that and I've seen this happen, and maybe I don't know if either one of us can explain it, the why or the how with words, but
Uh-huh.
there is something where when we're willing to kind of put our guard down or put our sword down,
Yeah.
and then the other person feels this this kind of open-hearted expression instead of an attack,
Yeah.
then what I've seen is the other person doesn't have to feel wrong or doesn't have to defend,
Right.
and then can actually kind of pull his or her head up out of their lap, right,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that shame and that spiral downward, and then
Yeah.
look up and actually look into the eyes of the person they love and
Right.
see, oh, there you are.
Yeah. 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 It's disarming. So a big example, a couple comes to me and they're on the edge of divorce,
Mm-hmm.
and they're in agonizing arguments about how they threaten to leave each other.
Yeah.
And let's say it's the woman threatening to leave the man, and every time it hurts him.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, the woman is, I direct her to say something very different, which
Yeah.
is, something like, I'm in so much pain
Yes.
that the only way I know how to express to you how bad I'm hurting is by sharing with you that I want to leave.
Yes.
And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to leave, and I love you still, And I don't know what other words to use to illustrate how bad I'm hurting.
Brilliant. That is so brilliant. That's exactly how I would have said it, right? It's like I'm
Yeah.
hurting so much that
Yeah.
the only thing I can do is say to leave. And actually, vulnerably, I will say that was one of my bad habits in my marriage years ago is I would do exactly that. I would be like, well, maybe this should just be over, or
Yeah.
maybe, we're done, or fine, I guess this isn't working anymore. And
Right.
it really was out of that just so much vulnerability and feeling like, well, if I leave first, then I don't look foolish, or,
Yeah.
I don't have to be left. I don't have to be abandoned. And right, that's coming from that protected place versus, oh my God, I feel like my heart is breaking and I'm so scared right now that
Yeah.
the only thing I can do is protect myself in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And the brilliant thing, I'll talk maybe to the women for a second here. If a woman can be that vulnerable and say that to the man,
Yeah.
she gets to do that amazing thing of just giving a man exactly what he wants, which is a job to do, so he can then love her and make her smile again, because he has no idea how to make her happy at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll just come forward and say, uh, "Oh my God, that's why you've been telling me you're leaving me? Wow,
Right.
wow. I love you too, sweet." He just comes forward.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
remember in my marriage too, where, he would say, wow. And this was a kind of culture we were in too, of rather than blaming a man, like if a man's not making a woman happy, then maybe it is time. I feel like I'm trying to squash 5 years into one sentence, but
yeah,
this idea that maybe it is time to move on.
yeah,
But I think there's so much to do just before moving on. But there was this idea of, okay, if this isn't working, or if my being here isn't making you happy, then something else needs to change. And then
yeah,
I can also see where um, I see so many different dynamics in men and women, right? Where
yeah.
with women, I think we can have a desire to nag and complain and point to what's not going well. I guess I
Mm-hmm.
think now that I say this, men can do this too,
Yeah.
versus a desire, right? I see that on the flip side, or, the opposite side of the coin of every complaint is a desire.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's more, and this is what I've seen too, it's more vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
to share a desire, because, well, if I share that desire and the other person doesn't agree with it, want to meet it, says no, then I'm left alone again, versus if I'm just complaining and nagging, or saying
Yeah.
that something's awful here, or I'm going to leave, I still get to kind of save face in a way and not
Mm-hmm.
open my heart to being broken.
Yeah, it causes more of the same. If you actually are truly deeply vulnerable about what you're needing, and literally exposing your heart to the other person,
Yeah.
and the other person does, if they don't give you what you need, that's a bit of a different thing.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But if they don't understand the level of importance to you, that's the biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel received and how important your desire is, that's very different from whether or not they meet it. And couples skip that and
Yes.
just want the other to do what they're asking, and they actually miss most of the intimacy. It's like the skin on a vegetable has most of the antioxidants, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they miss the richness because of knowing the meaning of that request.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just recently did a recording, and I'll put this on the podcast outtakes and raw footage page. So if you haven't gone there yet, you can go to Shana James Coaching /Man Alive. And I did a recording with a colleague, Steve Horseman, about vulnerability for men and why it's so challenging and why it's so important.
Yeah.
And right, because I'm just seeing here, I mean, we're talking a little bit more about the woman's side and the woman being vulnerable. And for you listening as a man, because I think mostly men will be listening, but women, I'm sure you'll get a lot of this too. But as a man, if you look at your woman, and I also don't want to assume everyone's heterosexual, so
Sure.
we're using heterosexual examples, but I think this goes, in any gendered relationship. But for this example, if you're looking at a woman and she's bitching, complaining, saying she wants to leave, like, the truth is you haven't gotten to the heart of the matter, right?
Yeah.
You haven't gotten to this vulnerable place. And a long time ago, I committed that I wouldn't leave a relationship unless we were actually having a vulnerable conversation where we both together felt like, we can be on the same page of saying, oh, wow, we're not serving each other anymore, or we're not opening or growing each other anymore. But when you look at a woman and she's just lashing out at you, I'm not saying you should stand for abuse, but what you can start to know is that she's only showing you this surface. And if you start to interpret it as, oh, this is a lot of pain and this is a lot of hurt, then you can actually be bold and courageous and say, honey, I actually think there's something deeper here, or I think there's some pain here, and I actually would like to know what it is. And most of the women I've coached have rarely had that experience in a relationship conversation.
Yeah. Something I love teaching a man, because the man is feeling criticized. He's feeling like he's imperfect, like it's his fault, and the woman is saying the same thing over and over. And I coach the man sometimes to say something like, sweetie, you've said the same thing to me 6 times just now.
Yeah.
So I think that means that I'm not listening well, and you have something more important to say than I even realize, or maybe you even realize. So tell me another time, and I want to only know what you're trying to tell me, and I want to get it.
Right. I really want to get it.
Yeah. Because sometimes, honestly, the woman says it over and over, and she is so in the loop of saying it over and over, it doesn't even occur to her that he would interrupt it with vulnerability.
Right.
Yeah. And she doesn't even know what she's looking for him to do. Except, even if he says, okay, I get it, or understand, it's not enough.
No.
It needs to be named what's really happening.
Yeah.
So.
Well, right. And it needs to be heartfelt. Like, it, for all the couples I've worked with, for one person to say, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
From an intellectualized place is very different than, I think what you're saying is this, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
And then that's even different from, oh, I think what you're saying is this, is that right? But with this underlying addition of, oh, I really care. I care so much that I'm willing to, at least for the moment, kind of swallow my pride and swallow this desire to lash out and defend, and swallow my uncomfortable feelings to really get your world and understand you.
Yeah.
And then and then ideally, hopefully, right, this goes back the other way, that then men get to be understood as well.
Yeah.
But right, it takes those moments of, I call it, I think I've talked about this on another podcast, I call it riding the dragon, where for myself, when I'm about to kind of explode or lash out, I imagine that I'm on a dragon, like a tiny dragon in my chest, and I pull the reins back and I make it go back down so that nothing really crazy comes out of my mouth.
Yeah. You brought up the idea about how there really is 2 people with 2 different things happening.
Yeah.
So as I'm asking a woman to be vulnerable and to risk, and I'm asking him and teaching him how to listen, I actually have to slow things down even further. And I say very quickly to him, and I say, you're equally frustrated about different things, and we're going to reverse this. And if you can, just know and have trust that we will get to that also.
Right.
Because what you need to be understood about is hurting equally but different.
Yes.
So are you willing to do this for her and do it one at a time?
Yeah.
And his answer is always like, oh yeah, absolutely. Because
Right. Once we know that
yeah.
we're going
Yeah.
to be understood, or there's going to be, we get a turn, to be held and understood. I think it's so much easier versus if a
Yeah.
couple's been in this dynamic for 10, 20, 30, 40 years and they've
Yeah.
never had that. And it
Yeah.
seems like it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that happens a lot.
Yeah. So, okay. So if you were to say why vulnerability is the most important, and we don't have to get too theoretical or
Sure.
intellectual about this, but
Sure.
but is there anything more we want to say about why vulnerability is the most important thing to heal a relationship,
Yeah.
or does it just take us into some other, deeper place? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So if I have a couple that's been together 30 years and they've put two children through college and they come to me, they've hurt each other's feelings several thousand times without acknowledging what's occurred. All
Yes.
right.
I'm laughing, but it's so
Yeah.
painful too.
Yeah. Now, to solve that problem
Mm-hmm.
and rewind several thousand harmful moments
Yep.
is impossible.
Yeah.
Vulnerability brings out resilience in the heart, unlike anything else. There's not a second thing that does that.
Mm.
There is no other couples training or sexuality, tantra, spiritual way other than being vulnerable and feeling understood by the other. That's actually the only thing where if you can successfully do this, actually, if I guide a couple through 6 or 7 deeply vulnerable moments,
Yeah.
all of their other 20,000 hertz dissolve.
Yeah.
Because they literally have no idea that their partner still loves them.
Yeah.
They've lost that, and they get it back by knowing how all of the hurting is something they would really like to not have any longer.
Yeah.
And they
And I
don't
love what you
know
just
how. They don't
said.
know how. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what
Yeah.
you just said
Yeah.
too about the connection between vulnerability and actually being understood.
Yeah.
Because I think that when we first meet and we're in that chemical reaction, we feel so loved, I think in part because we feel so understood.
Yep.
There's this sense of, oh,
Yep.
my partner gets me, or this person gets me. And then we lose that over time.
Yep.
And right, those moments, I think so many people are just longing for, like, do you even see me? Do you even know that I'm here? You don't know me anymore. You know nothing about me. And
Yep.
some of it, I mean, I like to challenge couples in a way too, to be willing to be known.
Yeah.
I think that is part of vulnerability, is a willingness to be known and a willingness to be seen. And then the thought that just came after that is, I think there has to be a kind of willingness to risk losing the relationship, right? Because if you're continually just trying to hold on so tight,
Yeah.
that there's no option to be vulnerable because it might fall apart, then everything seems to become so brittle and fragile.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point about, okay, the idea about willing to lose the relationship. So one of the things that I bring the couple back to a lot of times is uh, they will talk about big things like houses and mortgages and children and divorce so I bring them back down to, we actually need to learn what success is. And success is entering an argument and 2 minutes into it, stopping and saying, we're in an argument. And the greatest success, after a few hours of this training, is when a couple can interrupt an argument and have a really sweet 4-minute conversation. Because intimacy and vulnerability takes a few minutes, and arguing and not connecting takes 3.5 hours.
Right.
So that when the men come in and they say to me, I just don't want to do any more processing. All we do is processing. I say, oh, you're in luck. because we're going to remove 95% of that, because you're actually not connecting at all in this arguing, and it's
Right.
all abstract. And the goal 30 seconds into a conversation is to realize if you can do another 30 seconds and be vulnerable.
Yeah. I
And
love
that's
that.
it. Yeah.
I think that's probably such a relief for men listening, right? Like, oh my God, I don't have to keep processing. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
I think one of my favorite things, sometimes when I work with men on their own is getting to stand in for their partner
Yep.
and getting to give that feedback of, okay, now I feel you connecting to me, or now I feel you understanding me, or oh,
Yep.
now my heart just relaxed. And I love that it sounds like, you do that with your couples too. You guide them to get to that place and make sure that it happens, and make sure that the men, really, really get, oh, this is what I did differently, or
Mm-hmm.
this is how I'm interacting in a way that actually makes this happen.
Yeah. I usually ask the woman, so how do you feel? And then she'll say, "Oh my God, that was so great what he just said." And then I'll say, "Tell him why."
Uh-huh.
Because he doesn't quite know why. And she explains, because you didn't turn away from me. You didn't start talking about yourself. You didn't
Mm-hmm.
defend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You just said, "I want to listen to what's going on with you."
Yeah.
And it's quite simple. And I often talk about how they have 100 things in their mind, and the tricky part is they don't know the 2 or 3 things to sort to the top of the spreadsheet.
Mm.
And I help them find what those couple things are to
Yep.
then say.
Yeah.
And it's legitimate. They don't know which thing to pick, but there is a specific thing to pick.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always love, somehow it's become important to me to be an ally and an advocate for men, and I just want to put it out there that a lot of times the conversations
Yeah.
in the world these days around communication go toward women being understood and men listening, and you already did say this, but I just want to put a plug in for
Yeah.
men. You really get to be heard and you get to be understood, and
Yeah.
in addition to men sometimes not having the sex lives they want, I see so much pain in that place of not having the affection or the listening or the care, that they used to have in relationship. And so I just want to say,
Yeah.
that from my experience, and it sounds like from yours too, Derek, that's possible. And that even if it seems really far away right now,
Mm-hmm.
that it actually may be a lot closer than you think.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say one thing, tying sex back to vulnerability. uh, you know Men want affection, want touch, want sex, and that's kind of the way into them. And but remember, let's slow it down and take one step back from that. A man that can share deeply and vulnerably about how much it hurts that he doesn't have sexuality working in his relationship, that's the start. That's what makes it not all just shallow and lust filled, that he wants sex. To actually share with her what it means to him, that's the start of something really changing. You there? Uh-oh.
All right, so we could talk about this for hours and days, and I'm wondering what we want to leave men with. Anything that you feel called to say, and I'm thinking for myself as well.
Yeah, yeah. Anything for men. The woman coming towards you, often when a woman is pursuing and kind of the chaser, and or it feels like she's nagging, she is desperately wanting connection, And that actually shows the level that she is still wanting to be in relationship.
I love that.
Yeah. So as a man, if you can step out of thinking you've done anything wrong,
Yes.
and know that she doesn't really need you to admit everything she's done wrong. She needs you to understand she doesn't feel close to you, and she wants to.
Yeah. I love that. That's such a great way of putting it, right? Like the degree to which she is loud and complaining or nagging or yelling at you is kind of the degree to which like she actually wants to stay, and she's frustrated and she just doesn't know how to communicate. And so I'll just add to that and say, right, if there was a specific action I would give, it would be that kind of race to vulnerability, or that ability to swallow your tendency to maybe fight back or defend, and see if you can actually take a deep breath and say, oh, it seems like you're really hurting right now. Yeah. Or I think there's something you're trying to tell me, like you said, Derek, that I haven't heard yet and I really would like to. And I've heard men say back to me, yeah, but she's just going to say this or she's just going to say that. And that may be true. So I have a couple things to that. One, if you say it in a rote kind of way where you're actually not caring about her, she's more likely to, just lash out back. Mm-hmm. So again, the more you can actually feel compassion for her, the more she's going to receive it. And then I always like to say, when you're vulnerable, it is like putting down your sword. And so if someone's trying to fight you and you don't fight back, they can't do it for very long. Yeah. Right. And so if she lashes back at you and is like, you still don't understand me, you never understand me, you're like, I know I haven't in the past. Yeah. And in this moment, I'm changing my tune and I'm right here. And this is going to be, I want it to be different this time. And she might, blah, 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 and still, you could actually still vulnerably stay there with her. So, this takes some practice, and that's why Derek and I both do what we do. But I want to give you that tool of being able to actually be vulnerable no matter what. There's an amazing book. I don't know if you know of this, Derek, or if this has been in your repertoire, the Undefended Love book.
Nope.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Good.
A really, really good resource.
Great.
And how can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Just go to understandeachother.com.
Great.
And there's a contact page, and they can even actually, I'll say for this podcast, they can do something I had last year going, which is kind of like a free intro call if they want to. Great. If people want to describe what's going on in their relationship, they can contact me from that page. I'll show them how to set something up on the calendar. And awesome. I do Zoom or Skype calls, all over the world, and work very effectively with couples on screen. It works really well.
Great.
And I work with individuals now. I'm starting a women's group. There's probably going to be a couple hundred women in the group, and that's going to be a very big supportive environment. It's not just for dating. It's going to be dating through vulnerability, through relationships. So kind of coaching people over a good 6-month period into relationships and how to spot, emotional vulnerability, availability.
Awesome. So that one's for women. So if you know women, pass that on. Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much for doing this with me. And we'll have to do a part 2, part 3.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shanna.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. I enjoyed it.
Me too. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.